monthly lunch. I think that was really a wise idea. So we could get a lot of networking in and whatnot as we refresh now for the first of the afternoon sessions. My name is Gillian Cranius and I work with HCZing. And I was lucky enough to be the first one to say I'll be moderator and let me choose the workshop I'll moderate. So really happy to be here in this session on 8 to 80 cities. Trying to think back on when I was 8 and what my perspective was like on public space. You know, when I was 8, and I have an 8-year-old, so that helps. And as I'm past halfway between 8 and 80, you know, looking forward, I think is really important and really valuable for us. And I in my last workplace, I worked closely with someone who did seniors programming, and she always shared with me all the lessons she was learning, and it made me really realize how much more we have to listen to the perspectives of people who are our seniors, who are elders in our community, because we all hope to be there someday enjoying our communities, like 8-year-olds and everybody else in between. So I want to introduce you to our presenters. We have Alyssa, I've learned your first name, but not your last name, Alyssa Bird, who's going to present first. They're both from the same organization. And Emily Monroe, who's sitting here, will present next. And in my little chat sort of before the session, I've learned that Alyssa and I share a common friend who's also a planner, that they went to school together, and she's coming from a planning background. But if I understand it from my common friend, it's that her heart and her essence is community engagement. And so it's wonderful to have people who know planning and work in planning and who work with planners, who also are really tuned in to the ground and those of us in the community. And then Emily and I spoke a bit, and she's coming from a background in international development. And I know from my experience that a lot of the best methods and processes and tools I've learned have been from around the world, and often much less resourced communities who have come up with really wonderful processes. And then we can innovate and bring them here. And so we're very lucky to have you working here. And hopefully, well, I've heard you also do work internationally as well with this lens, with this perspective, with this approach. And so anybody who gets to benefit from that will certainly be better off. And so I look forward to what we have to learn in the next hour and a half. And I think their combined presentation will be about 45 minutes to an hour. I'll let you kind of facilitate that, and then we'll have discussion afterwards. And there is some kind of checkout pieces near the end, but we'll just get to them when that time arrives. So welcome, Alyssa, Emily. Thank you for coming.
So that was an amazing introduction, probably the best one I ever got. Amazing.
Fun song.
Yeah. That's great. So Emily and I are from 880 Cities. And 880 Cities is a nonprofit organization that works to create more vibrant parks, streets, and public spaces, and cities where people can walk and ride their bike and access those places. The 880 concept comes from the 880 rule. So if you think about an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, and if we build a city that's great for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, we believe that you would end up with cities that are great for everyone. Simple and easy, to the point. These are the sorts of things that we do. We do workshops, presentation, consulting, and public space planning. Public space planning is what we're going to talk about today. And then we also do areas of expertise are community engagement, health promotion, sustainable mobility, and open streets programs. And then an international best practice informs our approach. Our executive director is originally from Bogota, Colombia, and he gets to travel the world, and Emily and I get to hop on the plane sometimes with him too. So just to kind of get a quick introduction, it's kind of nice to know who's in the room. So if we could go around, maybe not say, or say what your favorite public space is in your city or town, but maybe just a one-sentence answer. You can go around. Can we start?
Okay. So my name is Gillian, and I live in the north. Well, I live in whatever uptown Toronto. This is a neat one to share because I walk my kids back and forth to school, although not my grade 7 daughter anymore. But my son, you know how kids walk along sidewalks, and I remember doing it, that you don't walk on the sidewalk. That you walk on people's front lawns because there's little stepping stones or there's neat things to go in and jump around and climb up, and I let my kids do that. And there's one particular drain pipe that has a sort of old-fashioned one. It's like a mushroom lid on it, and someone painted it as a mushroom. So it's a really important like landmark on the way home, and it's so rich. It's just this little thing that somebody on their front lawn painted, and so I really appreciate it.
Very good.
My name's Leanne, and I live in Brampton. And my favorite public space is, technically I live in Bramalea, which was, I believe, Canada's first planned suburban community, which was designed with mixed use and green paths and everything really well connected. And I just have to walk, out of my driveway across the street, and I'm in a beautiful green path to walk my dog, or for my kids to ride their bikes to the dentist or school or whatever.
That's wonderful. And
I'm Maria Chu. I live in Toronto. I work with Cancer Care Ontario, and my favorite public space is, I guess, the Leslie Street Spit, which is, I guess, this artificial piece of land that is extended out at the bottom of Leslie Street. And it's mostly built out of construction waste that they've turned into its own ecosystem.
Great.
My name is Anita, and I'm a project manager at Evergreen here in Toronto. So I'm from Toronto, and my favorite public space in town, I have to say, is probably walking to work in the morning. I have a long walk that goes from a really busy neighborhood on DuPont through the residential, incredibly affluent Rosedale, down through the valley of nature trails. It's about a 45-minute walk to the Evergreen River Parks, and it's beautiful. It's probably the best part of my day sometimes.
That's great.
It ends at Brickworks.
Yeah.
I'm Emily. You'll hear from me in a minute, but I live in Toronto on the East End. And one of my favorite public spaces in Toronto is the beach. And I think it's great because it's something a lot of people in Toronto or visitors to Toronto don't know that we have. We have this beautiful beach just outside of downtown, and it's a wonderful public space.
Back to you.
Hi, my name is Mary Catherine, and I also live in Toronto, and I actually live in the beach, and it's a great place to live. There's tons of, lots of green space, lots of wet facilities, and a waterfront with the boardwalk, which is just a wonderful place to walk your dog or whatever. It's a great neighborhood. That's my favorite spot. Great.
Hi, I'm Angela Zee. I come from Hearst, Ontario, which is quite a long way from here. It's in the bush. So green is everywhere. I work for Health Crossroads, and I think my favorite spot would be the fitness trail. We have this long fitness trail which goes around the river, follows the river, I should say, and it's one of the only things we have that is really made for us to walk in. So I have to work on that. Yeah.
My name is Janelle Vandergrift, and I'm from Ottawa. I would say my favorite place in Ottawa is my neighborhood. I live in Chinatown, New Italy. It's a great neighborhood, and recently they just put in a new trail that goes along the old train tracks that goes to Arboretum, which is another one of my favorite places in Ottawa.
Great.
Judy Pike, and I live in Oakville, and my favorite spot is the park by the
I'm Kate Hall, and I'm in Haliburton County. And one of my favorite places is in Minden, the village of Minden, and it's the Minden River Walk, and it's a paved pathway along the Gull River on both sides, connected by a pedestrian bridge, and it's a beautiful spot.
Okay. I'm Elaine Fisher from Fort Frances, Western Ontario, and my favorite spot is our waterfront. If I can get my butt out of bed early enough in the morning to bike, I love seeing the sunrise come up over Green Lake.
And my name is Linda Bumstead, and so I'm from Grey Bruce, living in Owen Sound. And I just feel really fortunate. We have a Bruce Trail going up, so there's lots of spots for us.
And I'm Alison Dukevich. I'm from Sault Ste. Marie, and I guess my favorite spot is the Hub Trail that's just been built a few years ago, and it's 23 kilometers around the center of the city, and most of it's paved, some of it's on the street, but it's really well used now, and we're just hoping for more spokes from the other pieces of the city, so it's really well used, so great.
I'm Bernie McCall from London, Ontario, and I really enjoy our Thames River that runs through the city. and the multi-use trails that are on either side. You put your kayak in the river, you can walk on the trails, you can ride your bike on the trails, you can cross-country ski in the trails. It's a great thing, and it's been well maintained over the years and further developed, so. And it's so packed now, like, it's hard to get on, like, because there's so many people. We need, expansion.
It's a sign of a great public space.
Yeah, really.
Hi, I'm Cynthia. I'm here from Toronto, and my favorite place is the beaches.
You'll go to the back. Sure.
Right?
Yeah, why not?
My name is Shauna Babcock, and I work with Kid Active, and we coordinate our Health Communities Partnership in our region in the Ottawa Valley, which is where I live now, but I grew up in cities, and I'll just, in terms of a favorite public space, I'll just pick up on your story about walking your kids to school, and the most interesting part is not on the sidewalk. So I love bringing my now grown up in a rural area where natural spaces are so readily available. I love bringing my kids to the city, and they look for those green spaces and people's lawns to walk on, and then my sister goes, that's somebody's property. So the acquired public space.
I'm Lois Dewey. I'm the coordinator for the partnership in Leonard meets Grindle. I live in Swiss Falls, and my favorite space would be the park along the river. And so many interesting things to be seen in the river. That's over the Rideau, along the Rideau system. So all kinds of different birds. We've had otter and mink, and it's just always a source of delight.
Great. Nicole Mansfield, and I'm with the Healthy Communities Partnership in Alderman and Norfolk. And we've got a lot of great public spaces, but probably one of my favorite ones is the one trail that connects Simcoe, where I live, to Port Dover, so you can walk the whole trail, and it's not very long. It's about 10 kilometers to go from one town to the next. And the Port Dover has a beautiful beach and everything else, so just one public space connects us to that. It's great.
I'm Sheldon Rollo. I am chair of the coordinating committee for Health Communities Health in Norfolk. I live in Dunnville, Ontario, and I guess my favorite place would be the park and pier at Port Maitland.
So I'm Annie Pereira. I'm with Devon Consulting, and I live in Mississauga, but I'm very fortunate to live very close to the Waterfront Trail. So I love this place. What is not to love that so many little pocket parks, and then a big park, and then a little park, and then you walk through the houses. I always dream, okay, one day I will buy one of these by the water, but I keep dreaming for a while, and then I made it to the Port Credit area, and it's always something going on up there. So I think the city has done a great job planning that area.
Great.
Hi, I'm Michelle Bold with Strategy for Social Dispatch. I live in Midtown Toronto, and this is a new neighborhood for me, and I just love Witchwood Barns. Witchwood Barns is a new name for what were the streetcar maintenance barns in Toronto. And St. Clair Avenue used to be the end of the line and the boundary 100 years ago for Toronto. And the building sat apparently empty and boarded up for quite a few years, and then a group of community activists in the neighborhood got together and they redeveloped it, and it's 2 blocks from my house, and it's just fabulous. They have intergenerational gardening program, they have the stock food resource, they have artists living there, they have a storytelling center, they have a theater, people can rent it in their community, and they have a fabulous market, organic market every Saturday, and it's like a magnet for the community. Everybody walks there, and it's just wonderful.
Great.
My name is Carl Martin, and I'm with the Toronto Center for Active Transportation, and I would have to vote for Kensington Market in Toronto.
Last table.
My name is Julie Belches, and I work for the Region of Peel. I also live in Brampton and have for most of my life. My grandfather was actually born in Brampton, but my favorite spot there would be Chinguacousy Park. Has a little barn with farm animals and pony ride. They've just There's like a splash pad there now. There wasn't like a little mini wading pool. They have parks like with swings and stuff like that. And there's a football field where a lot of the high schools will go and play games there and things like that. There's all kinds of the main events in Brampton happen there. And it used to be across the street from one of our buildings. And so we would go out at lunch and we'd be able to walk around the trail and everything, so.
Lena Federa from the Ministry of Health, and I live in the east end of Toronto, so I have good access, I would say, to Ridge Valley, which I love going to just to hike or to take the dog for a walk, and we've got this really great hill that I run up and down so often. It's a little too cold for it now, but yeah, good place. Great.
And I'm Jane Hoffmeyer, come from Peterborough. And like many of you, I love the cycling trails that go past the river in Peterborough, the Otonabee River. And for me, what's a real destination within that system is a small business, a cafe, that rents community public space and operates and draws on, not only provides sustainable coffee and sells baked goods from other locally sourced products. So that's a real destination within a destination.
I'm Karen Babcock. I'm a health promoter with Niagara Region Public Health. I live in Grimsby, and my favorite space is Connection Trail for the Bruce Trail. And it runs from downtown Grimsby all the way up to the top of the escarpment. And it's short enough that you see a lot of families with little kids that are using it, and it's really, really busy. So it seems like a really good hub for people in the community to be able to see each other. And my children always see other children when we're there, and it's just really good, and it's a good workout too. So.
I'm Robin Calda. I'm HC staff based at Health Nexus. And I live in the west end of Toronto, and I ride my bike to work most days. And my favorite public space is the bike lane going southbound on Beverly between College and Dundas Street. So I'm like 9 kilometers into my commute, and the last kilometer I hit this beautiful wide bike lane with new pavement, and it's really wide. It goes downhill a little bit. That's my absolute favorite.
Oh, that's fantastic. So a lot of you talk about public spaces and why you love them so much, and I think you all hit on the things that I'm going to talk about what makes a great public space. So it's a really good start to the conversation. Sorry. We're good. So we're here today to talk about the Make a Place for People project. So for this project, So why did we focus on public space? So public spaces are parks and streets, alleyways, that sort of thing, are really the low-hanging fruit when it comes to health promotion. A lot of these spaces, the ones that you talked about, are the great ones, but there are a lot out of there that don't really have all those great amenities and the programming and the management that comes with them. So we decided to focus on public space as part of this grant project. So we received money from the Government of Ontario to work with 8 sites in Ontario. And we wanted to help communities program them and give them the proper management so that they could be real sites to help make healthier spaces in these communities. So why invest in public space? Well, first off, the people who can't access parks and public spaces often go without exercise, and that's really important for low-income communities who don't have the money to go to a gym or a rec center. Studies show that green spaces help reduce blood pressure and stress and help improve recovery after surgeries. There's stronger social ties when people have great public spaces to access. Green spaces remove pollutants from the air. Elderly and youth in large cities really benefit from those public spaces. And that there's also economic benefits. So great walkable places can boost retail activity and economic development. For an example, New York's High Line was predicted to bring $4 billion and $900 million in revenues over the next 30 years. And I think that number has increased since then. It's been exponentially phenomenal for the city. And it's because it is such a great place for people to go and access not only locals, but it's also a great tourist destination. And that cities are really defined by our public spaces. So, you talk about the Witchwood Barns, which are really becoming this hub of activity in a city, or the canal in Ottawa, or all these other parks that you're talking about in your communities. And they're really, really important and vital to the image that's portrayed about them. So the Make a Place for People project, we chose 8 sites in Ontario. These are examples of them. You can see they're all a little bit forlorn, kind of lost some investment over the years. So we worked with, in the bottom here, we have a park in Ottawa. This is Breakwater Park in Kingston. This is an alleyway in Toronto. This is Patterson Park in Thunder Bay. This is another park in Toronto, Bursey Park, which is actually just around the corner here. Then we have a pedestrian area in Wasaga Beach in the middle at the top, and Mississauga, Streetsville, Main Street Square that we worked with. Oh, and on the far side is a park in Guelph. So the process that we went through included an engagement process. So really looking at who is using the space and who's not using the space, and engaging them in sort of quantitative measurement as well as qualitative. Then we want to engage the people who are using and not using the space to inspire them and think about the space differently and what it can be, and then empower them to really take hold and be stewards of the space and really get engaged with it. And then hopefully transform that space into a really vibrant public space that they can access as a community destination. So the first thing you want to do throughout this process is actually find out if a place is working. So we have some key elements so you know that. The first is that you start with the people and not the space. It's not about fancy architecture or design. It's about actual people. Like what you were saying about the trails, that they're packed, and that's a really good sign. So just like engineers count cars, we count people. And that helps you create a foundation and a strong case for investment when the actual process is over. So you want to measure who's actually using the space. So this is an example from one of the parks that were part of the project. And as you can see, children are underrepresented as well as seniors. And so that means that there's a really narrow age bracket of who's actually using the space, and so more people can certainly be engaged. You also want to measure whether people are male or female. Women tend to be more choosy and a little more aware of the context of the space. So for example, this is a very safe room. There's lots of women here. Whereas in a park, if there aren't a lot of women, it means there might be something wrong, that women don't feel safe, or the seating isn't quite comfortable, or it's not clean, that sort of thing. So as you can see, females are underrepresented in this context. And so as a public space, we love this quote: a public space is like a good party. You always stay longer than you intended. So you want to measure how long people are actually using that space for. Are they just passing through, or are they actually staying and enjoying? So in this example, 74% of people spent less than 10 minutes at this park, which means they probably only just walked through it. And you want to measure throughout the day. So you want to look at the morning, who's using it and what are they doing there? Are they just walking and biking through it, or are they actually sitting and staying and enjoying the space? Afternoon activity. So, in this example, 46% of people were sitting and resting, which is a good thing, staying and enjoying the space. But then still only 33% were walking through it. And then you want to also check it out in the evening. So this inappropriate behavior, and a lot of the spaces, you get rambunctious folks or illegal activity happening in those spaces, and you don't necessarily want that. You want to really make people feel safe and welcome in those spaces.
Just to interject really quickly, I just wanted to bring your attention to this slide because it relates to part of the presentation that I'll be giving later. So this information and the ones before were from Patterson Park in Thunder Bay. So just keep these in mind because you'll see pictures from the actual park and how we engage people afterwards.
And then you also want to measure in different seasons if you have the time. So a park or a public space really transforms in the winter, and it's much more common to have fewer users. And we're an all-season kind of country, so it's really important that those spaces are active 24/7, 365. And this is Patterson Park in Ottawa, if you're familiar with that, anything you think of it. And so what makes a great place? We kind of touched on it a little bit and all the things you like about your spaces, but we have some kind of key things that you can look for when you're deciding whether a space is great or not. There's 3 key elements. So you need excellent management, consistent programming, and appropriate infrastructure. So excellent management. So that means more than just picking up the garbage. Management means kind of maybe having a friends group that looks after the park, but really you want to think about your parks as a community center. You wouldn't have a community center that didn't have someone at the door or a sign or something welcoming people in, making them feel comfortable in that space, and you want to think about your parks in the same way. And you want to have consistent programming. So things going on all the time, everywhere. Here's an example, you have farmers markets or theater and entertainment. You want to have activity during the day and at night. This is Dufferin Grove Park in Toronto, where it's very active with children and families during the day, but you can also do campfires at night for a really reasonable price. And it keeps people in the park and makes it feel safe all throughout the day. And then again, you want to have activity in the winter and in the summer. So this is an example from the larger picture is Kingston. So at City Hall, where there used to be a parking lot, they've made it a skating rink in the winter, which is fantastic. This actually is a direct quote from a Toronto Parks staff who said that parks are unofficially closed in the winter. And you really want to get that mindset out of your head. You need your parks to be open in the winter because they create active spaces in a season when people normally aren't. And this is just a key picture. So again, as I talked about this example, so in the winter, this is what becomes a skating rink. And in the summer, it's a really vibrant marketplace. Here's the skating rink. And that's a great example of what can be done and how public spaces can be flexible and active all the time. And then it comes down to appropriate infrastructure. So you want to have the right amenities, food and drinks, good lighting so people feel safe at night. You want places to sit, and you want to be able to access that space. So can people get there? So the basic amenities include garbage cans, a water fountain, a bathroom. If you want people to stay there, they need to have something that helps them stay there. And then again, the great access. So can you walk? Can you bike? Some more auto-dominated landscapes, you might need some parking, but if you can't have that parking space, make sure that there's great transit. Maybe a great bus station that makes people encouraged to take the bus or a train. So people need to be able to sit. The grass is sometimes wet, and seating is a great way to make people stay. And that should be very comfortable and relaxing. And as well, when you think about that seating, you want to be able to make sure that people can gather. So don't push your benches so far apart that you have to scream at your friend to sit across from them. Make sure that people can talk and meet new people and really discuss. And then there should be something nice to look at. A lot of you talked about waterfront views. So if there isn't a lake around, what are people going to look at that makes them feel like, oh, this is really something special? Water fountains do that a lot, but it also could be murals or public art, that sort of thing. And then you want to invite activity from all ages. So that includes, infants to 8-year-olds to 12-year-olds, 17-year-olds, and beyond. This is a really great example of Bryant Park in New York, where they have knitting classes for older adults, but then young people also get involved too, which is really great. And so I'm going to turn it over to Emily, who's going to talk about the more qualitative side of engaging people in public spaces.
Thanks, Alyssa. Sorry. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is the importance of people and community engagement in the process of planning really wonderful and effective public spaces. So we chose this picture specifically because we know that the process of public engagement doesn't always look like this. Not everybody's smiling and happy to be there. There's this perfect diversity. There's a whole bunch of different ages and different incomes and different backgrounds. And we know that public engagement does not always look like that. It can be really difficult. It can be something where you put so much effort in and you just sort of fall on your face. This is actually an example from one of our engagement sessions that we did in Kingston, Ontario for Breakwater Park. And we were so excited. This is going to be a youth session. And the weather was perfect. We had all these chairs. It looked beautiful. We were going to have pizza. It was going to be so fun. And nobody came. Not one youth showed up. And it showed us how important it is to just keep trying until you figure out how you're going to reach these people and actually have them engaged and involved in the process of planning a public space. It can also really take a long time to involve people in the process of planning. We hear this a lot from city people at the city or business people who are very used to being able to just get down to business, get things built, get a plan going, and sometimes public engagement can really take a long time. And one thing that we often hear is, don't you end up with the same thing anyway? There's 1,000 wonderful architects, landscape architects, planners in Toronto, in any city that you're from, that can draw you a beautiful picture and really come up with a lovely plan for a park or public space. But from our experience, if you talk to people, you won't end up with places that look like this, that are really hard and barren and concrete and windy, or places like this. This is a sort of a semi-public space in New York City. Or something like this, which is actually a picture from the park that Alyssa was talking about in Thunder Bay, where you can see that this fence was created, it was actually created to keep people out of the park because they were having problems with insecurity in the park. And of course, that only exacerbated the issues because now there's nobody using the park except for the people you kind of don't want using the park on a consistent basis in the way that they are. So, as Alyssa talked about, the key to a wonderful public space is excellent management, consistent programming, and appropriate infrastructure. But people are the thing that you really need to connect with those decisions and those processes. Parks and public spaces really and truly are our city's symbols of democracy and equality. And that's how we have to remember how they function in our cities. We have to make sure that they represent the people who use them, the people that interact with them, the culture that is in the neighborhood around them. So public space management, programming, and design should reflect all of those things, the values that we have as a community, the identity that we have, the ways that we want to use the space. Is there places for kids to actually sit and enjoy their day? This is a little tiny, it's a children's library in Bryant Park. And they have really tiny chairs. It's such a simple, easy thing to be able to provide infrastructure for people of all ages, but it's something that we so often see left out. In fact, in Streetsville, we were working on a project there, and they were really resistant. I don't even know if they've embraced it in the end, but they were really resistant to this idea of just provide like 6 chairs for kids because it sends the message that you're inviting them into the space, and it's just as affordable as having an adult-sized chair. So are there spaces for us to do what we feel is important as a community? But if our public meetings look like this, which I think in many communities they do, in Toronto and most of the communities that we go to, often our public meetings are sort of middle-aged, baby boomer age, white, middle-class people. And if we have, those are the only people that are represented at our public forums where we're planning parks and public spaces, we can't expect our parks and public spaces to look as exciting and youthful and different as that. And what's really important from a health perspective is that often it's the people who are the most benefited from parks and public spaces that are most removed from the decision-making process. So we're talking about youth, we're talking about older adults, people of low income, children, people with disabilities. So how can we begin to change this? Well, this is what we wanted to undertake with the Make a Place for People project that we undertook, was how to engage the most vulnerable people in the process of planning their parks and public spaces, and how can we leverage that engagement to improve the public space by making the case to decision makers that there was really an important need to improve these public spaces for the health of the community. So here's an example from Bursey Park in Toronto. Bursey Park, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Bursey Park. but it's a very small park in Toronto. It's behind the Flatiron Building, which you can see right here. It's very close to Union Station and the St. Lawrence Market, but it's really a park that is showing its age. And since it was built, the neighborhood has changed dramatically. It's not just for business people anymore. There's business people, of course, that use it. There's also a lot more residents and families in the area. It's a prime thoroughfare for tourists. But the park really isn't functioning as well as it should. This is a photo at lunchtime. It was quite a nice day out, for sort of a winter season. But as you can see, it just doesn't look like an attractive place to sit and enjoy your lunch. So one of the really interesting things about the neighborhood is there is this growing population of children. And I think in a lot of urban centers, that's a familiar trend, is that more families are moving to urban areas, and our parks and public spaces need to adapt and be able to cater to those users. So what we did for this project was we worked with a group of students at, I'm trying to just remember the name of the school, not that it's super relevant, but a group of students in Toronto, and we got them out to take pictures of the public space, because we found that that's a really wonderful way for people to tell us what they think about a public space, because it changes the way an adult looks at a space. Seeing a space, just as Jillian was talking about, and we've heard from a number of people, seeing a public space through a children's eye is very, very important. They look at things in a really different way. I mean, physically they look at things in a different way. They're much shorter than we are. So that changes your perspective and how safe you feel. They are really interested, generally speaking, in little things like the wildlife. They were super fascinated by the squirrels and all of the different plants. And through this process, we asked them for different ideas about what they thought the public space should be. And here's some examples of what the kids came up with. So they wanted a canteen with different kinds of food. They really wanted to slow the cars down so that they could get there safely. They wanted to replace a lot of the broken seating, things that we'd heard from community members as a whole. But one of the things that's really important is that children are very honest most of the time. This girl, she would not tell you a lie, and we, from her, can really understand a lot of important things without having them sugar-coated by decision makers about the problems with the public space. So very bluntly, there's nothing to do there, and there isn't for kids. It's kind of gross, and that's very true, which can be a difficult pill to swallow sometimes for the city to hear something so bluntly. But I do like the birds, and I like the squirrels and the flowers, and I really like the trees. The cigarette butts are disgusting, which is a really significant problem in Percy Park. There's nothing to play on, and the guy on the bench made me feel weird. And this last one is really important because it's something that we hear about public spaces in every city that we go to, is that there's a problem with homelessness or street people using the parks and public spaces. But usually when we hear it at a public forum, it's not mentioned in such a non-judgmental way. This girl didn't say she didn't want him there, she didn't say he shouldn't be there, she just said he made me feel weird. And we said, well, if you were there with your mom, would you feel okay? Yeah, I would probably feel better. If there were more people in the park and he wasn't, the only one or one out of 3 people in the park, do you think you would have noticed him? And do you think that you would have felt as weird? No, probably not. And do you think in the end that it's okay that he's there? This is a public space, and we talked a lot about the importance of public space and that it's a place for everybody. And in the end, kids really understand that a public space is public, and as long as you're not doing something illegal, that everybody is welcome there. And one thing that's very important about public spaces is that even if you have negative behavior, as long as there's a lot of positive behavior to balance it out, then people usually feel safe and it doesn't affect the quality of the overall space. And one thing that's really important about kids and public places is that they're wonderful messengers. So they go home, they say, Mom, Dad, can we help to make this park or public space better? And that helps to build stewardship and ownership and community building and help with the long-term sustainability of the place. This is another example. This is from Patterson Park in Thunder Bay, and this is where you saw all of those different statistics from. So this is a park where there's very, very few women using the park. There's a lot of issues with inappropriate behavior. There's fighting that happens in the park. There's been some very unfortunate social incidents that have happened there in the last number of years, which has really tarnished the image of the park. There's very few users overall. It's usually empty, more or less. And this was not, I didn't have to wait very long to capture a picture like this. Most of the people who are using the park are using drugs or alcohol. The fence around the park, as you can see, makes people walk right around the edge instead of going through the park. And it's actually created the opposite effect, which is the park has made it so that this park is sort of owned by the people who are generally involved in the negative behavior. And that's made it a very scary place for people in the community. And kids aren't going there. Like when we were there, we took a group of kids there. There were needles in the park. It's just a terrible, it's in a really poor state of repair. So when you have a park like that, we always say that it's really important to go to them, to talk to the people who are using the park, to be able to get their ideas for how to improve it. But when you have a park that is underused, how are you supposed to reach those people? So we had to come up with some really creative strategies for engaging them. And this is an example. It's an area with very few well-used public spaces. We actually had to go to the local mall where there's a food court because that's one of the few public places that people would hang out and engage, we could engage them. So we set up a really simple activity center. We had some free juices and granola bars and cookies that people could take. And we just asked them really simple questions. We asked them what their wish for Patterson Park was. What did they want to see happen in Patterson Park in the future? These are people who would never come to a public forum in the evening at 7 o'clock at City Hall. That's a very intimidating experience for a lot of people, but they're the people who need to be using the park. They're the people who need to have a healthy place to spend their evenings, especially when a lot of people are living in condos, are living in places without access to recreation. One of the other issues with Patterson Park was that there was a lot of conflict between various people in the community. So you have this sort of seniors residence across the street. It's primarily white people from Thunder Bay. And they thought that the reason that the park was in such bad shape was because it was being used by Aboriginals. They were really, really negative in many ways about that, and they had very strong views about the state of the park. So obviously that's something that we really wanted to work on, to be able to improve the relationship between those different groups in the community. So we went and spoke to them about, one was educating people on the importance of public space and that of course public spaces are open and accessible to everybody. The other was just to get their ideas and really to begin to get at the root of what the issue was, because the issue wasn't Aboriginal people. That's not the issue. The issue is that the park had fallen into disrepair, and that was the way they saw it because there were only a few people who were using the park. The other thing that we did was we went to a wet shelter. So a wet shelter is a place for chronic alcoholics. And these were the people that were using the park on almost a daily basis. And they said that to us. They said, I hope you know that we're the people that are using the park. We're really sorry. They would get in fights there and all that kind of thing. But they really had a love for the park. And they really had wonderful ideas for how to improve it. And more importantly, their ideas were exactly the same as the ones we had heard before. They wanted more places for kids. They wanted it to be cleaned up. They thought that it wasn't a safe place, that there was always sort of dangerous, inappropriate things happening in the park, and they wanted that to be improved. They were very specific. They thought that the Christmas decorations had been there for too long, so they wanted something more beautiful. They had a lot of different things. And actually, here's an example. They said they wanted to help with the garden, so they really wanted to be involved in improving the park itself. But the most important thing was this flag. They wrote, "We love yous," because they were so excited and delighted, and they thought that it was such a different approach that they were finally engaged in the process of planning anything at the city, not a park or a public space, but anything, to really be invited and to actually have somebody go to their home, which was the wet shelter, and be involved in the process. And we really hope that because of that, maybe they will actually help with the garden and begin to see the park in a different way. Here's some examples of the different flags that people made, their little wishes were. And the reason that we decided to take this approach with creating these banners was to do something together, to sort of metaphorically and literally bring people's ideas together so that you could see where the community aligned. And then on this really dreary, cold day, we put all the flags out around the whole park so that as people walked along the edges, which is where they would normally walk instead of through the park, they could see all of the different ideas that the community had and slowly build the will and interest in improving the space. In the end, through that project, we collected over 600 ideas, specific ideas from community members. And here's an idea of what we hope the park will look like in the future. They're still looking for funding for the project, but I'm really confident that they will find it. So this is what it looked like before, and this is our image, the community image of what it should look like in the future. So take down the fence, that was one of the things that we heard the most. In fact, the police suggested that they have an event where you tear down the fence to really show this new step in the community. They wanted it to be safe and accessible for everyone, to have events and activities all year long, to be filled with history and culture, and to make sure that it's green and comfortable and inviting. One of the things I wanted to mention is how much money we've managed to leverage through processes like these. An example is here for the project at Bursey Park. The original city budget that they had outlined for improvements to the park was about $250,000 to $300,000, and they just released an RFP for the park that's for $3 million. So I think being able to articulate the needs of the community and to have it in paper, we produced a report for each of the projects. It really showed the value of investing in these public spaces and being able to layer the value of health onto the community needs, onto the community wishes. That is what really built the will to invest in some of these parks and public spaces. Here's an image that's from a nighttime view in wintertime. And the last example that I wanted to end with was from Dundonald Park. I know there's a couple people here from Ottawa, you're probably familiar with it. And this was such an exciting project for us because unlike our other projects that were focused on improving health in the community, we actually had a partner. The partner that we had in Ottawa was Centretown Community Health Centre. So they applied to be part of this project because they saw the connection between this park not functioning well and the health of their community. And I'm just going to give you sort of an example, and we can have a discussion about how things have gone since we undertook the project with Centretown. But this is an example of how we engaged people in this park. So we called it Good Cheap Fun because that's exactly what it is. These are some of the partners that we had at Centretown Community Health Centre. It was really the staff that they had, their community outreach staff and physical activity specialists and coordinators. So to engage people in this process, we did lots of things. We held public meetings, we had focus groups with different groups within the community, the Somali community, Chinese community. There's a lot of different people that we connected with. But then we really wanted to make sure that we were able to reach out to people in the park in an easy and accessible way. So that's our little station, and I remember when we were implementing the project, somebody walked by and said, "Only in Canada would you see a sign for free cookies." And I kind of didn't want to break his heart, but to let him know that there's not free cookies every park you go to. But he seemed pretty excited about the idea. And we just got people out and moving. So it was kind of like a little pilot project where we began to animate the park to see how people reacted to it, but also use that as an opportunity to talk to them about what they wanted. We had somebody there who was like a yo-yo master. Not too many of those running around anymore, but people loved it. They really loved the yo-yos. And what was interesting was this is another park that has a reputation for not being the safest park. It was stated that way by the police in Ottawa. And there's some sort of tough-looking characters that hang out at this park. Again, these are people who would never come to a public meeting. They're people who generally would be kind of disinterested when we first talked to them. They weren't exactly eager to talk to us about what their thoughts and opinions were about the park. But we were there long enough that they saw the yo-yos, and they actually asked to use them. And then they sat with their yo-yos, playing with their yo-yos, and a little while later they came back to us and they told us what they thought about the park, how they thought it could be improved. They told us stories because they're very intimately involved in the park and they really understand the users and how things could be improved. So it's just an example of how simple activities that are really accessible begin to change the way you can approach people and how people are engaged. And in case any of you take on a project like this where you want to improve a public space, we wanted to share some of what we call magic makers with you. So these are really, really simple, affordable, they're not rocket science ideas for how to get people engaged. And one is hula hoops. It's like really can't fail. You have hula hoops and music and people just love it. Everybody of all ages, she was excellent at hula hooping. But you can see that wasn't just one day of practice either, obviously. Lots and lots of people have never tried hula hooping in their life. This is a great picture because it captures this older fellow. He was the grandfather, the mother, and then the little kid just rocking out with her little hula hoop. And then this is another thing just to prove that anybody and everybody can hula hoop. Usually just to wake people up in the later stages of the presentation. And hula hooping is a wonderful spectator sport, so if people don't want to participate, they can just laugh at their friends and family while they do it. The other is free treats. Now I know you're all health professionals and we always get in trouble for bringing cookies, but exactly. But the fact is, here's our apples. We bring the apples, but as you can see, the cookie container is empty. And the fact is, you need something that people are excited about. It needs to be, we sometimes don't even tell our health partner that we're bringing the cookies, but we do it anyway because we know that people aren't going to come for apples. You don't have to give them a whole cake, but it has to be something that is like sinful and delicious and gets them really excited and wanting to participate. Now, this is proof of how often we use it. There's our free cookies. This is Kingston, more free cookies. Here in Thunder Bay, we use free treats. Those were really bad ones. We also had free cookies and our fruit way at the back. And that is what gets people to stop and talk. Then the last one is, everybody knows the KISS principle, obviously, to keep it simple. So in a lot of public processes, people would consider that simple or this simple. And really, it's not that simple for a lot of people. If you are interacting with people with language barriers, who have low literacy skills, younger people, people with visual impairments, there's a huge long list of reasons that some people will not be able to participate if this is what an activity is based on. So here's an example of the type of activity that we would use to make sure that we engage the most vulnerable people in a community. Share an idea. We write it in marker on purpose instead of with a computer because it seems more approachable, it's more fun and informal. Here's another example. We just leave a pile of pictures so that people can rifle through them and get ideas for what they think might work. Because in Ontario, in Canada, but I know the Ontario context better, our standard for parks and public spaces has become so low that people think a lot of our parks and public spaces are really great when they're really not, when there's really nothing to do. We have become completely complacent to the idea that a lawn that's mowed once a week and garbage that's emptied, not even picked up because a lot of staff won't actually pick up the garbage on the ground, they'll just remove the garbage from the garbage can, that is all we need from our parks and public spaces. And it's very clear that that's not true. The biggest determinant of how well used a park or public spaces is the activities that are happening in the park. So you need, as Alyssa mentioned, you need somebody to manage that process. What is happening on the park for a senior to do that makes them feel safe and welcome and like they have a community? So those pictures are there to inspire people, to raise their expectations about what a public space can be, and to show them examples from maybe a wonderful park in Ontario, but maybe an example from around the world of what we can see. Here's an example, that was an example from Kingston actually, where we went to a community dinner hosted at the Salvation Army because we knew that that was the place where we could engage people. So in the end, sometimes we have this very simple idea, but when you layer all of the people's ideas together, you begin to have a full picture of what people want. And you begin to have a chorus of voices that are in support of these changes, and that's how you begin to build the political will to improve our parks and public spaces. And in the end, we really believe that if we do a better job of public engagement, we'll finally get some resources back into parks and public spaces, these things that are so vital and important to the health of our communities. So why do we use this approach? It's to get people talking and interested about parks and public spaces. This approach tends to be pretty easy to get people involved. It's more affordable. It's a lot more fun than hosting a traditional public forum. You can reach a really wide range of people who aren't usually engaged in the process of planning parks and public spaces. People can actually be in the space or see the space and think about what they think should be improved. And you can really see results immediately, because what you're doing is essentially a little pilot project, having activities for people in parks and public spaces, and you can see how the space changes as a result. So if our parks and public spaces are symbols of democracy and equality in our cities, we have to think about outside the box about how we plan those in the future, how we make them better places, how we can create these places that support health and build healthy lifestyles. We at 880 Cities, we talk a lot about how the design and construction of our cities has led to an inactive community. Everybody in this room knows about that, and parks and public spaces are a really vital component, as well as our streets, of course. So we believe if we go to them, if we go to the people in a community who actually need to use these places, then we'll build better places, we'll build the political will to see them improved. And this is an example from Dundonald Park in Ottawa. These are all things that have been done as a result of the project. With the Centertown Community Health Center has been absolutely incredible there. They put together a calendar of events. They got these movable chairs, those weren't there before. They have sing-alongs, music in the afternoon. This is a wonderful picture. There was this couple that actually brought a tablecloth out. They had a really romantic evening in the park. They had a water fight that actually made national news for some reason, I don't really know. They have what's called the O-Town Bombers, and they go and knit in the park every week, and they just put colorful knitting stuff all over the place. They have a walk-a-mile group. They have a whole bunch of different activities. And the reason that they've been so successful is that they've involved the community in the process, and they continue to. They have a monthly meeting to plan what should happen in the park. And it's a really wonderful example of how the health community saw the need to improve the parks and public spaces. And we're done. Questions?
So the Community Health Center is taking responsibility for programming. I'm just wondering what the recreation department's role might be in this.
Yeah, in this case, the recreation, is there anything here from the City of Ottawa? Okay. The city is quite behind in terms of really getting involved in the project. I think it's going to come, and the Centertown Community Health Center is really confident that support from the city will come as a result, but they haven't actively participated in the programming basically at all. They've done a few things that they hadn't done in the past, which are signs of progress, fixing park benches and that kind of thing. But all of the programming has been organized in partnership with Centertown Community Health Center.
So the project that you did was for them, not for the city?
Yeah.
Okay, I just trying to clarify, because it's a city-owned property, I was wondering what
Yeah.
its role was, yeah.
That's right,
The
exactly.
city was involved in the process, like they came out to a lot of the stakeholder meetings and that and gave their input, but they were much more of a hands-off approach.
Yeah.
They were fully aware that it was happening.
And I think that's one of the things that's so interesting about this project is that it's not ideal. The best case scenario is that the city was at the table and really eager to take it on. But that's not going to happen in every case. I think it's less likely to happen in some of our poorest parks and public spaces. And this is an example of where the community saw an issue, they saw the need to improve this park, and they kind of jumped over the city. They said, we're going to do this. We have to make it a better place now. And I really believe that the city will get on board and you'll see investments in the park, but so far nothing significant.
And it's funny too, just to add, all the kind of improvements that have happened on behalf of the city, like fixing the benches and that, have come from the Make a Place for People Dundonald Facebook page.
Yeah.
That is exploding. Like there's constant activity on the Facebook page. So they put pictures of, we have this bench and it's really sad, like the picture to get the bench fixed. And then the city is like, people are paying attention to this really poor bench, and then they fix it.
So they're being pressured to do stuff.
Yeah, they had to resort to shaming them. Yeah.
I think the programming piece is really important because it seems to me that municipalities are backing away from providing more recreational programming or continuing on with existing programming. And at the same time, public health also, their mandate has changed to a more policy-oriented mandate as well. And so the programming piece then really gets, gets lost, and so it's a concern. Certainly, the bricks and mortar might get taken care of, over time through different means, but really getting people out to use the space and encouraging people to use it through different programs and things is tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other public space I think is screaming out for this type of approach are our school grounds.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples about that?
Alyssa, I was thinking, it just reminds me of the thing that you wrote for Brownsville. Not really?
No.
There's some examples, but I think it could be improved a lot. Actually, one is on the Esplanade. There's an example of a schoolyard that opens up to the community in the evening, and it acts just as a local park after school time is over. But there's a lot of interest, I think, in being able to leverage our school spaces, whether they be indoors or outdoors, for the community in a better way. And I don't know of any specific project that is sort of really focused on the outdoor space of parks, of schools, to make them community parks, but I think it's really important.
And I think there's value for it as a space that young people have as an experience, early experience of doing this, of being involved in trying to shape their physical environment that they must go to every day. And I guess I'm reflecting on an experience I had in working with young people at the high school level who were trying to quit smoking.
Yeah.
And so one of the benefits that they identify why they like to smoke at school, and some of them say, I smoke more at school than at home on the weekends, it's the social connection that they get. It's the opportunity to get outside and to be with people that they think they feel they have something in common with. And right now they're asked to not be on the school ground. So if we talked about, what would it look like if you felt more welcome on the school ground? Where would you go? What would the space look like? I think it's just crying out for that type of approach to school grounds and thinking for the benefit of the young people who are using our school facilities.
Yeah, that's a really neat idea and a wonderful example, because I think you're right. I think back to my days in high school, and I never was a smoker, but it was I kind of thought about maybe doing it just because it's like, look at all those people chatting outside, and you just stand around and feel silly. So you want to be have some way of interacting with people and still feel
in a positive way.
I have no idea who was first, but go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to that the idea of children really taking ownership over that space too is really important. I did some research that was related to playground improvements, but they were always very top-down processes. And they were making these great, visually beautiful parks and that, and they were valuable to the children, but they didn't have that kind of stewardship piece that like I was part of this process and I can help take care of it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to note that at Evergreen we have a small grant program for school ground reading projects, and some of these challenges that you see in these photos we have on school grounds, it's the old concept of 20, 30, 40 years ago where safety meant like locking the fence, having lots of fencing. And I think we're just starting to realize, and I think part of the problem with school ground reading is that there's so many partnerships required long term, so you need the involvement of the school board, of course, support from the principal, teachers, parents groups, who's going to take care of it over the summer. So you need so many volunteer partnerships that it can take quite a long time. And I mean, in some ways, school boards can be similar to municipalities where things can take quite a long time. There's different levels of bureaucracy, and you need long-term support. So and then of course the challenging thing I think is getting enough funding. So we have small startup grants, but it costs more than $2,000 to put in a food garden. So it's challenging, but we have done a little bit of work in Ontario, which has been nice.
One of the things that just made me think of this project in Ottawa, and we'll get to all your questions, sorry to waste more time talking, but is that the issue with permits is really significant, and that is something that really stops a lot of community-based organizations from doing park programming. And I think that it's something that we can really try to work at municipalities for, is to take off some of the restrictions. The service providers and community groups, nonprofit organizations, they're providing a service to the city by animating their public spaces. And they're going to charge, a group of 15 women who want to do yoga $130, and you have to apply 6 months in advance. Some of those permit processes are 10, 15 pages long. So one of the things that happened at Centertown was now community-based organization can go through Centertown, and they are sort of the bridge between the two, so that those people don't have to deal with all of the issues. They kind of have a pass, Centertown Community Health Center, and I think that's really helped to animate the space also. There were definitely more questions. I don't know, at the center here.
Yeah, and I wanted to just comment on something you had said, and the not being able to do policy because programs aren't appreciated. But one of the things we've learned, and I think the Healthy Communities Fund through the province supports, is that the road to policy can start many different ways. And you've made it very clear in your presentation this afternoon that by articulating, engaging the community and getting them to articulate their needs, and then taking that forward, it's a bit of a process to get to that end policy point, can help tilt the scale in terms of decision makers seeing the relevance of certain kinds of policies that could be brought into place. And you're talking about it right here, and having more open access to permits, or different ways by which people can make these places more conducive to the things they want to do and use them for. So I see it as all part of the journey, and you might start in a place that doesn't look like you're ending up with policy, but if you can see the end point of where you want to go, you're going to get there. You're going to get there.
Yeah, good point. In Ottawa, as far as I recall, at the Parks and Recreation Department, part of their mandate is cost recovery. So they are trying to, through their parks programs, to recover funding to make their Parks and Public Spaces Department functional. But it's such a illogical model because parks and public spaces, the benefits are so much bigger than your user fees. It's how much money you spend on healthcare. It's safety in the community. It's property taxes, property values. And I think from a policy level, that's exactly the type of stuff that you need to articulate it before people realize that they need to change the policy so that they can reap the benefits of it, instead of just seeing it sort of narrow-mindedly. Okay, it's a really good point. At the back.
I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on how 880 gets involved in different parks across the province. What's that process of being chosen, and can specific parks or communities request help from you? Or
sure. So this project that we talked mostly about, the Make a Place for People project, was funded through a grant from the Ontario government through the Healthy Communities Fund. That was 2 years ago, so we wrapped this up at the end of March. Through that process, we were able to work with 8 specific communities, and then we also did some other stuff related to the project as well. So that funding has run out. We are crossing our fingers for another Healthy Communities grant coming up in the next few months. It's a little bit different of a focus. It's looking at the neighborhood level instead of just one park or public space. And otherwise, we work with communities through fee-for-service work, so we can act as consultants on different projects. Or if they find a grant that they can hire us through, that's how we would work outside of a grant context.
So do cities hire you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even conceivably, we who have access to Healthy Community Funds could hire 880 cities as a consultant. Is that,
Yeah,
is that
I
ever
would
been
think
done?
so, yeah, as long as it's, within the grant.
Was the Rideau Heights project part of the Healthy Community Fund?
Yeah, I think it was Healthy Communities. So,
Which one was that?
In March of 2013?
yeah.
We worked with, what's it stand for, KFL&A,
Kingston, Frontland,
Kingston, Lennox and Addington Public Health to do a community engagement process for the Rideau Heights community in Kingston. So it's a larger social housing development, similar to Regent Park, but on a smaller scale. But then it's also, other people in the community are also of lower income. So we did an engagement process to talk about barriers to physical activity within the built environment. So, that's part of the community dinner that Emily was talking about. We went to the community dinner, engaged the people there, had some smaller meetings, we went to the schools, and that sort of thing, and then produced a report that public health in the city are now working with to inform, hopefully, the revitalization of the Rideau Heights community. Will be the same as Regent Park undergoing a major transformation. So that hopefully the built environment will be more conducive to those people who are going to be walking or cycling in the community.
So of the 8 communities or parks that you have developed revitalization plans for, how many sort of went the whole course? Because I imagine.
I think it's almost, I would say 50-50. Like all of them, I think, had a positive result as part of being in the process. But in terms of like major funding from the cities, Breakwater Park in Kingston, they got $2 million to redo their park. So from our perspective, there's sort of 2 sides. One is the funding, what people are really interested in, how much money was leveraged as a result of the project. So there's Kingston and Streetsville, their budget went up to about $3 million to redo their square. Bursey Park again, $3 million. And then in places like Dundonald Park, that is a bit harder to quantify, but in terms of the amount of volunteer hours, it would be really interesting to see what the financial gain sort of has been and what the results have been as a result of the project, but it's a little bit less easy to measure. So I think the results at Dundonald are really, really evident. And then we have Thunder Bay. Things are moving along. We were just in Thunder Bay actually last week, and they're basically trying to find, there's only one park planner in all of Thunder Bay, so he's trying to push the agenda forward. Things are moving with the laneway also. The BIA and the council are really interested in doing that. What else are we missing? So yeah, overall, I would say there's been progress in every city, but more progress in some cities than others.
And did the communities have to commit to certain things in order to be part of the project?
We had an application process. So we received 34 applications to be part of the project, and we selected 8. We selected those 8 based on a number of things: the strength of the partner, their relationship with the city, their possibility of actually implementing things in the future. So, at Centertown, they said they have the capacity to organize the community and all of those kinds of things. So we really looked at how likely the project was to be implemented.
Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the biggest factor was for those places that were more successful and seemed looking to get more support from the cities?
That's a good question. So I think a lot of cases, like with Bursey, the process was the thing that changed it. And really being hard on the city. They were not very happy with us, to be perfectly honest, at the end of the process, because we told them the state that the park was in. But I think that really pushed them to ask for more funding, to look for more funding for this. I mean, it's such a vital place in Toronto. It couldn't be located any better. And I think that actually getting people involved in the project, like that developed more interest, then having a report to go along with it, that really changed. They couldn't ignore it anymore. You know, we showed pictures of the benches being broken. There's cigarette butts everywhere. It's covered in pigeons. There's nothing to do. It hasn't been touched since 1980. That really encouraged them to do it. In the case of Streetsville, the mayor really got behind it. Mayor McCallion's from Streetsville, so that really helped. Yeah, so it's sort of been different, but I think that the role of this process was quite important. In Kingston, they had a long-term vision for the park, so I think we sort of dovetailed well with it and changed their ideas about what it should be, even if that would have happened in the future.
Just wondering whether you had thought of coming up with a toolkit that would support communities in going through this process, so that you know some of the steps that you've taken.
We have in our reports, and we also have a workbook which you can find on our website. So we have some stuff. We'd really like to be able to have a toolkit that any community can use, so that we can really invest a lot of money into something like that and have it be really useful. I think being able to tell the stories, I feel like a digital toolkit of some sort would be really useful, where maybe there's videos of how the process works, because I don't find it's necessarily always the same in a workbook format, but we do have tools available on our website as a result of the project.
Which is just 880cities.org.
We still have a little chunk of time left, and I wanted to suggest, kind of dovetailing on your question about toolkits and how, because of course a lot of us are there with our all those things going on, like, yeah, we could use this here and there, and maybe, you know, we could share with each other, and at the same time share back with you in terms of, as you're producing those resources, what might be key highlights. We definitely want to be sharing back with the rest of the conference. What are the key messages or key insights that you've gained from this workshop? So I wanted to ask people to maybe reflect on that just for a minute while I go back and get the marker. We'll bring it up here, and then we can share for the last 10 minutes, if that sounds good. So I'm going to do the formal thank yous at the very end, but I just want to, maybe part of this conversation is a bit of a thank you for putting this together, because, you know, it has impacted us. So if people want to share an impact, a key message or an insight that they've had, and then we can see who else has other related ones and maybe build our report back that way. Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just quickly, I think the process is invaluable that AAC uses. And it being a participatory, recognizing that the participants are the people that are using the parks and spaces, and engaging in a really genuine way, is that, for me, that's what speaks huge volumes as to the work you guys do.
Did other people have similar related responses that you want to speak to? Yes.
I think my takeaway from this was that it's amazing to, rather than coming out and asking for the city for $2 million for this park to do 5 things, the way it was almost done backwards, where you go out and talk to people, and it's different, like diverse community outreach initiatives and getting their perspectives with, and then before and after photos. So then the report is actually made at the end where you ask for money, when all the research has been done. I thought that was absolutely amazing.
engage, and then you're piloting almost, what do you say, experiment?
Yeah.
What were the other words there?
With diverse community groups.
Yes. Diverse involvement. Build energy, I mean, you see that, the energy. Okay, build as backwards, engage, experiment, build energy, diverse involvement, then together ask. Yes.
I think it reinforced to me the importance of being brave to take on contentious issues or contentious locations within the community, and trust the process, and trust that when you engage with people that they'll rise to the challenge.
Yeah, that's when we didn't mention some of the difficulties, but it's really, it's not always easy. Yeah.
Can I write on the back of yours? Because the one, my key insight from your examples was, you know, we want to build exclusion, but you also within that you challenge exclusion.
Yeah.
Because I think we all don't know what to do around that, so I really want to learn more on that. So I might add it on that one.
One thing that I took away from this, from a municipal point of view, they didn't really have the information on how to engage the community, because a lot of them, and I'm just thinking of the SUD, they always have those public forums, and no one ever comes. And we just had one on budget issues, and I think maybe 10 people came if they came. But there's other ways to engage people. I think they've missed that whole vote on like Facebook and Twitter to get the younger people, and the way you did it by actually going to the people. I don't think you would ever see someone from the municipality or Parks and Recreation going out and, you know, here write something on these flags. I don't think you'd ever see that, because I don't think they have that, you know, that information of how to get out there and engage people.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I think they're looking for new ideas, you know, and I think in the case of Kingston, for instance, they've continued to use some of the processes between the city and public health for a new park planning process. So I think by giving them the tools and saying it doesn't have to be difficult, you know, maybe they need some support in terms of facilitators and stuff like that, but providing them with another tool to use rather than just the public forum, because they're not trained in it. We can't expect them to always know how to engage the public. I think it's a good point.
Can I ask you to agree, and then you'll be after?
Yes, very related to what she just said. I'm a planner and I work a lot of public engagement, and I know how frustrating it can be those meetings where nobody show up after you've been planning for months and months. So I think the key here is to go to the people instead of asking the people to go to you, and go and ask very simple questions and put big sheets on the wall and just say, okay, write whatever you want to write. Instead of being so structured, as usually planners tend to do very structured, okay, we need to go to this workbook, and just plan a little bit more on the fly, depending on how the feeling is in the group, and you plan the activities accordingly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that Emily and I find when we're working with municipal partners, is that they get very excited about the engagement process and do all the planning and stuff, but then when it actually comes to happening, they get very nervous that the process isn't going to go, you know, like this is the agenda and we have to stop at 10 after 7 to ask questions and that. And Emily and I are more of a, you know, go with the flow. If the conversation is working, just let it happen, you know, let people ask their questions and that sort of thing. So being flexible, I think, is a really, really important message that you should remember.
And one thing that's really, there's another little tiny tool, is voice recorders, because then we use voice recorders all the time for when we talk with people, because then we don't have to like be there writing down a million notes. We can listen to it afterwards, put it on pause, and not worry so much about distracting from the conversation, because that's the part that really matters.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that coming from the City of London, which is known to be like ultra conservative, I don't know if anybody else has heard that in my hometown, but I have been really impressed this past almost 2 years as the city has gone through their official plan review, which has been called Rethink London. And you can, you know, just type that in and it'll come up and you will see what an amazing job. We talk about planners not knowing how to do public engagement, they do. I think there's a new breed of planners that's, you know, hitting the municipalities, and OPP in Ontario, whatever it's called, Provincial Planning Institute, is behind a lot of healthy community thinking when it comes to planners and how they're looking at things now. But they had workshops in a box, they had public forums, they've got the Facebook, they've got the Twitter. There was so many different ways that they worked very, very hard at and trying to bring the whole municipality of London, which is about 340,000 people, to become engaged in this whole process of something that's really kind of on the boring side, like land use, you know, and official plans. Like, it's not really stuff that people think about or want to think about. But I think they've actually been nominated for an award in terms of how they have gone through this process in, you know, a very unique way, I think, across North America. I don't think the amount of engagement and the effort and extent that they went to has been done quite like this before. So I just have to say there's at least one place that I think, you know, has made an attempt. Wasn't perfect, and it's just about over, but it's been a long process. But it has been as thorough and as best I think you can do it. And I think planners do know something about this. And, you know, if they don't, there's new information and a new breed that's coming along, and that they've got support from their own organizations.
So is the message there that planning it's on the verge of
Well, in a sense, planning is ahead of us. Like, it depends, you know, when it comes to where public health has been, planning was out of the gates on this years ago. For the OPPI, like those of you that haven't been on that website at all, but I don't know where you are thinking in terms of planners, but no, that institute has been ahead of public health. I speak from public health. There's others who are, you know, engaged ahead of you in public health. But I was surprised. I'm going, here, we're talking about this. They've already been talking about this. They're ahead of us. So I'm not saying everybody that's in the planning circles is there, but certainly as a profession, I think they're way up there. What?
That's very good to say.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, I'm also a planner, and I'm in the projects that we often do. One of the concerns of municipalities is managing public expectations.
Yes.
And that, I think, that is one of the reasons they build such tight structure around these things, because they want to make sure they're not over-promising or things they can't deliver, right? So I think, how do you manage public expectations within a kind of a loose framework, right? When you're talking to people and getting ideas and getting input.
One of the things we actually have at the end of our report is it's time to raise expectations. So I think when this always makes municipalities nervous is that we're trying to raise the public's expectations for parks and public spaces. So that's one. And number two is that in our experience, we don't get a lot of crazy asks. Like, a lot of the stuff, at least in the context of this project, is pretty standard. You know, it's like, I want a smooth, good, wide walking path. I want high quality benches that are situated properly. I want programming and activities. And it's possible that some of them lie outside of what is possible for a municipality right now, but I don't think any of them are things that we shouldn't strive towards. So that, in our experience, the concern about raising expectations, the public seems to kind of control themselves. You know, they're often like, oh, we can't have that roller coaster that my kid really wants.
Could be because you're focusing on a specific space as opposed to what do you want over the next 10 years, and then it's like everything and then some, right?
I think, that's probably part of it, is the context of it.
And another thing is just being honest about the process. You know, and saying that, you know, we're creating this report. You know about the report. Now, you know, you can go and talk to your city about what they're doing with the report. But that's the final product of our process.
One thing that comes to mind, we've been talking about animating public spaces, and then your comment about the schoolyards. And I work with workplaces, and so I'm kind of thinking, like, if we can animate and improve existing public spaces, and we can do some work on schoolyards, And then industrial areas or employment zones are an area that typically don't have any public spaces, and we spend most of our waking hours at work. And if we can create some new public spaces in areas where we work, it kind of helps to animate the municipality with those, you know, connecting those dots. And if you do it in a certain ward or a certain area, then you're promoting active transportation, where you don't just have a destination zone, but you might go from here to the school to, and it just helps to animate a whole municipality or an area of a municipality that maybe once before you just went to your favorite public space.
Should we take one more contribution and then we can start to wrap up?
Oh, I just wanted to respond, Mary Kath, just with a thought as you were articulating. It wasn't the first time I've heard that concern. And I wonder if it speaks to what I mentioned earlier, is our comfort as professionals, practitioners with conflict. And that it's okay to raise expectations. It's part of that visioning. Without conflict, we don't move ourselves. Without high expectations, without visions, we don't move. So just thank you. I think that's helped me think more about the value of conflict and how we can start to couch it in a positive way.
Those are typically the directives of the council.
Yes.
Don't raise public.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
even though we like to.
Yeah.
You do it on this one.
Thank you so much. This has been such a treasure, and with everybody here too. So this is for you, Alyssa, because you didn't get the package initially.
Thank you.
So we all have the same little book, right?
Yeah.
Book for the next couple of months while it lasts. Wonderful. So on behalf of HT Link and everybody here, thank you so much. And everybody, we have a half-hour break. So please network with your tic-tac-toe, grab a snack and a refreshment. There's some posters. And on your way out, there's an owl sticker you can grab on your table. You can take two if you want to stick one on your hand. The other one we would like when you leave, and Linda, right, has offered to sort of stand at the door and help facilitate that. But we have a little, you know, immediate data collection on your feelings about the workshop. On one side, we have how
This is quality,
and
this is utilization.
usefulness. Yeah, so you can put yourself in one of those 4 quadrants on the way out with an owl sticker. And enjoy your next workshop. Thank you.